Well, talk about an overreaction. Talk about trying to save face. France's response to the scrap diesel submarine deal has been, well, it's one of the most over-the-top acts of whinging I think we've ever seen. It's seriously dramatic, and that says a lot when we're dealing with the rather extroverted French. From the moment Australia pulled the pin on this $90 billion dud submarine deal with Naval Group, Paris has done nothing but throw their toys out of the cot. They've recalled their ambassadors to Australia and the United States, something they haven't done since 1995. They've cancelled a gala event to celebrate French-American relations in the United States. And now we learn France is trying to sabotage a potential free trade agreement with the EU and Australia. This is a major deal being negotiated by Minister Tian. French representatives are asking other European countries to pull out of talks on our proposed FTA with the EU.
Well, I think we've made it clear that we understand France's disappointment with this decision. So I think we've got to be absolutely clear in expressing the view that we understand why France is disappointed in this decision. But we also will be very clear that ultimately, in the end, we've taken a decision which is in our national sovereign interests, and very much in the same way that France makes decisions that are in its national sovereign interests.
Now, the cynic might say the French are experts at sabotage, especially when it's got to do with vessels at sea. The Rainbow Warrior comes to mind instantly. They've gone from protesting the decision to launching a full-scale, spiteful and childish campaign to punish Australia. They knew they were making C-grade subs for Australia. They also suspected we'd wake up to the reality once China cranked up their aggression. And that's what this is all about. Minister Dan Tehan was expecting to finalise the free trade deal with the EU before December. He will now travel to Europe to sort out the damage created by the French.
The EU want to continue to have that negotiation. The 12th round will go ahead, and it's just very much business as usual when it comes to our negotiations on that free trade agreement. Everything points to the fact that it's in both the European Union and Australia's interests that we continue that FTA.
So here's a message for Emmanuel Macron and his whiny mates in Paris. The contract was a dud deal, a disaster from day one. The original tender document in 2016 estimated the cost of 12 French subs to be $25 billion. 25! That grew to 50, then 60 billion, and that's when Australians started to jack up. It grew to 70 billion, 80, and finally it hit $90 billion, and the project was way behind schedule anyway. When you add in lifetime maintenance costs, the bill for Aussie taxpayers would have been $300 billion for subs which would have been obsolete by the time they hit the water. The first French sub wouldn't have been ready until 2035, and the last one wouldn't have hit the water until 2050. Overpriced, oversold, and certainly outdated. And as Scott Morrison points out, he's been raising concerns about the Naval Group contract for 6 months. The French could see it coming a mile off. A military pact with the US and the UK over state-of-the-art nuclear-powered subs just required us to bite the bullet and do what was best for Australia's security. As for the French, this is more than just ridiculous. We've fought alongside that country in 2 world wars. Thousands of Australians have given their lives for the liberation of the French. A very salient point echoed by the Deputy PM today.
Australia doesn't need to prove their affinity and their affection and their resolute desire to look after the liberty and the freedom and the equality of France. We have tens of thousands of Australians who have either died on French soil or died protecting French soil from the countries that surround them, in both the First World War and the Second World War. And I never expected they came at a price, because the price of those families, the tragedy of those deaths, is without price. It's without cost.
Barnaby's correct. There are entire fields on the Western Front filled with the bodies of Australians who weren't even old enough to shave. there's a sign in Villers-Bretonneux that many of you may have seen saying, "Do not forget Australia." I've taken photos in front of it. And they want to recall their ambassadors and ruin a potential free trade agreement that we've worked on for 3 years. When it comes to saving face, I've got to say, the French are just as sensitive about that as the Chinese. To Emmanuel Macron, tell your goons to back off. And just remember, if it weren't for the death-defying feats of Aussie soldiers and some exceptional commanders in that second battle of Villers-Bretonneux, the Germans would have taken Paris through Amiens in World War I in a heartbeat. As the kids there say, don't forget Australia. That is a debt worth far more than a torn-up contract over a few dud subs.